last night, the person that was the official sort of ANC voice was Paul Mashatile, which is the Treasurer General, and usually the Treasurer General only commented on official business, which was after the budget speech. So that was interesting to see. And then Ace Magashule, appeared out of the blue, and we all ran to interview him as well. And just comparing those two messages from from Ace Magashule versus Paul Mashatile, it was chalk and cheese. And so my reading of still is that I don't think there's one ANC. I think there's an ANC that is still riddled with, this factional battle still ongoing. And I don't think it's going to disappear anytime soon. However, I have to say, it was the first time that I felt Cyril Ramaphosa delivered a speech very confidently. There were moments of inspiration and moments of telling South Africans that, we should dream of a better South Africa. And I did feel it was a much more confident speech from hearing him when he, for instance, addressed us earlier this year when he didn't win an election, when he felt he didn't quite have the mandate of the South African public. So I do feel there's a bit more of a confidence within Cyril Ramaphosa that he is the elected state president of the country. But I must say, Julius Malema's reaction to his speech was quite scathing. He was saying that how can Cyril Ramaphosa tell us to dream? We've been dreaming in the past, and that quite frankly, he still believes that the ANC is imploding, and that he because we had asked why he decided and his party decided not to interrupt Cyril Ramaphosa's speech. And he said, we don't need to do that because, Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC is imploding. And so we can just sit back and allow them to do it. And that was the sort of response to, Cyril Ramaphosa's speech. So I think he's still not out of the woods. I still think, at Parliament, it's quite interesting because I had assumed Parliament would start in the coming days, but actually there's still such a lot of new members. So they're still just working on induction. They're still working out the different procedures, which of course they're telling us that that's the administrative work of the sixth Parliament that has to happen. That is very important before they can actually start the work. But if Parliament resumes, it's going to be literally, we're going to have budget speeches and approval of budgets in such a short period of time. One wonders if the ministers will be able to, do any justice to all those budget votes that will happen in a very short space of time in the coming days.
Crystal, how can you feel anything but confident when you're wearing a House of Monatic suit?
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard in the past, COSATU and especially the Clothing and Textile Workers Union urging South Africans to buy local, to reinvigorate the clothing sector in South Africa. It was for many years, especially here in Cape Town, it was one of the main job providers for many women on the Cape Flats. And that, of course, all changed over the past few years because of cheap Chinese imports and just, completely closure of factories. And so the fact that the president chose to wear a local designed and local manufactured suit that women worked on very hard clearly speaks to revitalizing the sector. So again, Ramaphosa, there was a reason why he had told us he wore a local suit manufactured here in Cape Town, was because he's saying that there's going to be master plans for the clothing sector. Now, we know that the automotive sector's master plan has been very successful. We know the VW cars that are built here in Port Elizabeth and export to different markets, that's seen as a success story. And now they want to develop master plans for the clothing and textile unions, also for the gas sector, for chemicals, renewables, and steel sectors. Now, this is not new though, because I had spoken to the former Minister of Trade and Industry, Rob Davis, on the master plan, and those master plans have already been developed. They just haven't been made public yet in terms of how exactly they see the sector growing, which particular sectors they can grow, how they will do it, the kind of jobs that they can can create. So those plans are already there. I think it's now just we're going to see, some sort of action on it, which of course we had hoped the president would actually tell us a bit more how exactly they will revitalize the clothing and textile industry. Because, for instance, it's fair enough to say, yes, we'll revitalize it. But we do know that, the past 2 years we've seen, international retailers like H&M, Zara, Cotton On really making such a mark on the South African market. We can now find an H&M store almost, in every town in South Africa. And they, of course, bring their clothes from outside. So it's going to be interesting to see what exactly they mean by revitalizing the sector. Because, yes, it's all good and well for the president to buy his suit. But, some people said, but how much is that suit costing? Can people afford it? And everybody would like to buy local, but it's, of course, much more pricier. And I think that will be, some of the kind of details that we would want to hear, what exactly these master plans mean. What does it actually mean for job creation? And, what's the time frame of seeing those plans coming into, into action?
Yeah, I mean, the other big issue, which seems to be related to this, because when you talk about the local manufacturers, you talk about industrial policy and maybe a much more muscular approach to build up South African industry, which, as you say, has been in decline. The appointment of Ibrahim Patel as Trade and Industry and Economic Policy Minister, do you think that is going to mean a much more energetic state policy behind industry and behind manufacturers? Is that something South African manufacturers should be hopeful about, applauding?
Well, I think there's, sort of still mixed reaction to Ibrahim Patel's appointment, because firstly, he wasn't on the ANC list. And so he was one of the two appointments that Cyril Ramaphosa can do as president. So he was one of them, and the other one was Patricia de Lille. So it means if Cyril made such an effort to get Ibrahim Patel back into his cabinet, it means that, one, he trusts him, and that two, Ibrahim Patel basically now has a super ministry, because it's the combination of the Department of Trade and Industry and Economic Development. And, we heard throughout Cyril Ramaphosa's speech was the importance of, foreign direct investment, of investor-friendly policies. And, so it's going to be interesting to see how, Mr. Patel will do this, because Mr. Patel is a very articulate, is, a very sort of skillful communicator. He chooses his words very carefully. Even as a Minister of Economic Development, he kept a very low profile, but we saw the work that he did, especially at the Competition Commission. That was where we could see Ibrahim Patel, in terms of how that Competition Commission took on the banks, took on foreign traders, everything. But, and so now he's in charge of everything from the IDC to the automotive sector, and he will have to be the one who's going to deliver and give us more detail of all these master plans. So, the work is, it's a very bleak situation if we look at, where the manufacturing industry is, where, where things will have to happen. And, it's a very bleak sector. So, one of the things that, of course, Patel will be doing is he's organizing a big manufacturing indaba where the business and government will discuss the sort of finer details of these grand plans. So I think, it's going to be quite interesting to see how Mr. Patel is going to do this. He's, of course, a former trade unionist. There's mixed love for him within the business sector.
He's on the left of the ANC. Is he going to get on okay with the finance minister? Because you get the impression that Tito Mboweni, maybe he likes shocking people, But since his sort of early days in the ANC, Tito has moved quite a distance to the right, and he's very pro-business. He's very unsentimental about state ownership and so on. How is he going to work with Ibrahim Patel? Will he? I guess he'll need to.
Well, he'll need to, and I think they've worked very intimately together because when Mr. Patel was still Secretary General of the Clothing and Textile Workers Union, Tito Mboweni was the Labour Minister. So, they do have a long history, working together. And I think, this is going to be quite interesting to see how that relationship unfolds, because there's fans of Mr. Patel and there's those that are not big fans of him. So I think the fact that he is now this minister in charge of a super ministry, and that's really going to be the engine room of, getting the manufacturing industry working again, and these master plans, it really there's a lot of pressure on Mr. Patel to get things moving. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how this really unfolds.
So he's going to be a really important player to watch in the new order post election.
Absolutely.
Any other big figures that you think have emerged in this period after the election that we should be looking at?
Well, I think definitely, the new Land Affairs Minister, also in charge of a super ministry, Toka Didiza. She will obviously, she was the former Agriculture Minister, has a very intimate knowledge. She was, one of Thabo Mbeki's, sort of bright minister. She then vanished from the political scene and was actually, at the Thabo Mbeki Leadership Institute. And then she was brought back as an MP. She was, also now she was the chairperson of this special committee that was set up to look at Section 25 of changing our constitution to expropriate land without compensation. So she really has quite intimate knowledge of what needs to happen within, the departments. And unfortunately, we did not hear anything last night from the president around land expropriation without compensation. So for many people, they were taken aback that we didn't get any detail of how that is going to happen. But having spoken to the minister, she was quite clear that, look, she brings passion, she brings in knowledge into this portfolio. She has a copy of this report that the president just received from this land committee that had to look at, the sort of finer details of what the president and the government should do regarding land expropriation. The president has it. She has seen it. She's saying that clearly this report is going to, guide her in her work, and that government is committed to ensure that they deal with the issue of land reform. And she says that, she's bringing passion to this portfolio. She wants to look at how agriculture can be an engine of growth, how it can create jobs, especially amongst young people. And she's busy studying that advisory panel's report, and, clearly it's going to guide her in her work. But again, we, from the president who during his election campaign spoke so passionately about land expropriation without compensation, to not even talking about that in his speech was quite surprising.
Election's over, I guess. I mean, so on that, you think Toko Didiza's strategy is going to be, there's an awful lot of land that is owned by the government that is not being used, and other sources. And to get a sort of a volume of land transferred to the majority black population, and that will be their kind of response to the demand for land reform. And they're going to push through with that, and hopefully the effect of that will be more black commercial farmers, more jobs in the rural areas, more development, more investment, and so on. And that could perhaps dissipate some of the pressure for going around expropriating land. And despite the kind of rhetorical commitment to the land expropriation without compensation, it doesn't look like that is going to be one of Ramaphosa's priorities or even the entire government's priority.
Yes, I think that is a correct reading of it because, because the state is one of the biggest landowners from local government